All right. Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Candid Cox cast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in coxing and rowing. And I get a lot of questions about women coxing men. And I knew that there was only one person that I could bring on to talk about this topic. So I'm really, really excited to introduce our guest today. So, first of all, I am Whitney Powell. I'm the host here of the Candid Cox cast. And with me today, talking about this awesome topic that I'm super excited to talk about is Hollandacht. Now, I will butcher that. I'm sorry. As I told one of your guys, Jasper, my Dutch is rusty. Um, but the Holland 8 Cox, Aranka Kops, and she is lovely, talented, and just the one person I had to have on to talk about this topic. So without further ado, let me introduce Aranka. And if you don't mind, please tell us a little bit about where you're from. Like, tell us a little bit about your background, and then I want to hear about your rise to the 8, which is very dramatic, very exciting. I think a bit of a fairy tale story. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm based in Amsterdam, and I started rowing and coxing in 2014 during the bachelor that I did in Amsterdam. So I was looking for a student sports club, and I ended up joining Skull, one of the rowing clubs in Amsterdam. And I started out learning to row, which was quite a challenge at the beginning because I had never rowed before. And then one of my coaches said, you're not that big, so maybe you can try coxing sometime. So I did, and I did a few trials, and then I got selected into my first and also my last women's team. Um, but that was a great year, and we had a lot of cool girls on the team. So they're still my best friends today. So I had a lot of fun that year. And then the next year, I got selected into the men's heavyweight team, the freshmen's eight, I think it is called in English. And that was a really cool year as well. I learned a lot about competitive rowing and coxing to a little bit of a higher level. Um, and then I just grew, developed in the heavyweights squad of school. So I ended up coxing the Elite Eight. Um, and also doing the competing at the FISU World University Games, I think in 2018 in Shanghai. Yeah, so I think that's a little bit of the experience I had. And then at the beginning of last year, 2019, I competed against the Holland 8, so the men's senior 8 in the Netherlands. And they were at that moment looking to try out some coxswains, and they asked me to do a training to join for a practice. So I did, and then the week after that, they asked me to fly out to Italy for their training camp. Um, and then based on the practices that I run there, they tested me on the European Championships in Lucerne, and then they let me stay. So I think that's the story how I ended up at the Holland 8.
That's so amazing. And it's so cool to be asked. I mean, in so many countries, I mean, at least in the US too, you have to do all the work, all the outreach. People aren't going to come, find you. You have to,
Mm-hmm.
and you do. I mean, you did all the work. You did all the work and you proved that you could do it. So it wasn't like you were just coming out of nowhere, obviously. But it's so neat to sort of have those advocates and have somebody say, like, we want you. We want you to come do
Definitely,
that.
it's a very easy place to start. It makes you feel quite welcome, and there's a lot of room for you to handle things the way you yourself would, and not really focus on proving that you're good enough alone, just doing what you do. So yeah, it was a very good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat. Now, moving into training with the team, you're sort of thrust into this whole other world of like now
Mm-hmm.
being on the national team. What are some of the differences that you found going from club and what you were used to moving up to that next level?
I think the practices were way more complex. Like for instance, I had never used a speed coach before during one of my practices, so I did a lot of I made a lot of intuitive choices, I think. So the practices we run at Holland off, they are way more complex. They are very strict. You have to be precise about the the stroke rate, the duration, the kilometers you're making during the training. So I think that was the thing that I got. Yeah, I had to get used to a lot. Yeah, it took me some time.
And are there still things that you're working on? I know you get up to that level too, and as coxswains, I mean, this is just my
Hmm.
personal opinion, but I think you never stop learning. Like you can always
No.
be a student of the sport, learn more about rowing, have something to work on, even at the top levels. So, is there something that you? I mean, you're clearly incredibly good at what you do, but are also trying to just continuously improve on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the focus points for me, like I trained a lot on the Amstel, the river, with a lot of sharp bends, and that was something that I really got used to. I know how to do. But now a lot of the focus is on steering just a straight course, which is extremely important. And like the speed that this boat has, it is a lot higher than I was used to before. So it's a lot of practicing, just getting that straight course right, and it's something I'm continuously focusing on, and also the precision as well, and just being clear. Also, like the warm ups, be very precise in that. Have the boys warm at the start of the training that you are going to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too. And despite what a lot of people think, steering straight can actually be fairly difficult. Um, not even having weather, not even
Mm-hmm.
even without weather, with nice glassy water, it's still a challenge for a lot of people to actually pick a point. Do you have any strategies that you use to kind of help yourself steer a straighter course?
Um, Definitely prepare, like look up the direction of the wind, the strength of the wind, like the places where you have a little bit of yeah, how do you say it? Like a piece in between where there's no wind at all. Like you have to be prepared and know the course. That is very important. And it's also important to not overthink. So be focused, be sharp, be precise, but do not overthink. Just watch and react.
I think that's so true. Not overthink it. That's a really good way to put it. Because you do have to kind of go with your gut, but also remember, those eights take a few seconds sometimes, depending
Mm,
on what rate you're at, what speed you're at, to actually respond to what you're doing. So if you make any movements, it might take a second and go, too far one way. So you do
yeah,
have to kind of just go with your intuition a little bit.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a really good point. So, talking about land and water, sort of two different things, and being a
Mm-hmm.
leader on land and water, there are very different ways that you earn respect. I think on a men's team, and you can tell me what you think. Maybe coxing women versus coxing men. Um, do you think, first of all, that differs in the way that you earn respect as a cox, men versus women?
I think it probably does. I do not have a lot of experience in coaxing women, especially not at this level.
I don't either, so it's okay. I don't either. So
No, but I think it does differ, and I think that guys are most of the time way more direct. I think so, um, and I think it's a very positive thing because you get a lot of feedback, and of course that's important for you to learn. And so in a guys team, most of the time when you're doing something wrong, you know it straight away.
right away, they'll tell you.
Yeah, they tell you.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very useful thing, but also it's sometimes it's hard to take. You know, it can be quite intense having that kind of feedback. So that's something you have to get used to, and have a little bit of a thick skin in that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I want to talk about. And we have a couple questions about that too, because that comes up a lot, especially with newer coxswains, masters
Mm-hmm.
coxswains, people getting back in a boat. getting back into racing again after only training for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They either have some fairly difficult personalities, or they just keep getting yelled at, or the guys just kind of start walking all over them and they start losing control a little bit, which can happen really quickly. So I definitely want to touch on that a little bit later. But what do you think on, let's start with land. What are some ways that we can be leaders as women? Let's say they're erging, they're in the weight room running.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what can we do on land to kind of show that we're still involved, we're still leading, we're still part of the workout, we're not just sitting on the sideline like playing on our phones?
Mm-hmm. I think it is important to know what is important for them. So trainings that are on the land but are important, or tests that are on the erg and that are important, you have to know that these things are important for them too. The results are important for them as well. Be really involved in the in the things that matter, I think, and be present and talk to them about that. Talk to your coach, understand why it's important, understand like there's a lot of physical stuff going on, and as a coxswain it's of course we have to take care of our own bodies, but it's not um as competitive, as precise as the physical stuff they are doing. So understand why they're doing it, and that it is important.
Yeah, I think that's really true. That's a good point too. So you would say, not only meeting with them, talking to them beforehand, either before the workout, but um, being there. I mean,
Yeah.
being present too. A lot of coxswains too will say like, "Oh, it's a land day. I may not need to be there." But I think if you really want to earn their respect, and if you want a seat in that boat, you have to be seen and you have to be around. And you may not have as much of an option now. I'm not I'm not sure. Like, you're probably not supposed to be missing a bunch of practices, but some coxswains are told like, "Oh, it's just a weight day," or they're just doing weights, like you don't need to be there. But I think you should be seen, if that is something that if that's a seat that you want, go there and help them, keep track of their erg scores, or just be there, just really be there. Um, and then when it comes to water too, I think there's a lot that you can kind of do on the water. So this is just regarding sort of earning respect, um, staying in control on the water. What are some things that you've had to deal with being on the water, even at first? Maybe you first get in the boat and you're kind of getting to know the guys still and getting to know how it works. What are some things that you had to do to maintain your authority, but also be that team member? So it's the tricky role that coxswains play, the leader, but the teammate as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I think one of the most important things is that you focus on the tasks that are assigned to you. So I think you put it very well in the sense that you do have to have authority, but it's not authority that is necessarily given to you when you step into the boat for the first time. So it's something that you earn, and that can take time. So I think one of the things I not necessarily struggled with, but I had to deal with in the beginning, was that well, what I thought before, like some things, like the precise things, or some things were just unclear to me, how the practice should run normally, and I struggled with that a bit. And so even though I had that going on in my mind, I still try to be as clear as possible to the guys as I could be, and stay calm. And I think that is the most important thing. You just have to stay calm and clear and confident, even though internally you're in a little bit of stress.
And we hear that a lot. You're supposed to be the one that's in control and calm and cool, but inside you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea
Yeah,
what's
and that's
going
all
on.
right. Just
Yeah.
give yourself a little bit of time to figure it out. Yeah.
That's true. And so let's say you make a mistake. Let's say you go out there
Yeah.
and because we're all going to do it. You get out
Yeah.
there, you Cox long enough. We just did an episode on this. You're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if you make a big mistake? Let's say, you call a distance incorrectly, something
Yeah.
that's fairly common.
Mm-hmm.
Call a piece down too soon because guys hate that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because they hate that so much. What do you do to recover from that? How do you handle that and sort of maintain your composure, but at the same time kind of regain your authority?
Yeah.
Authority in quotes, I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just own up to it. Just say, I'm sorry. I thought I was there already, but I wasn't. And just say I'm sorry, and then, get back in control and try again. And I think that is like, it's sometimes it can be very hard when you make a mistake and you feel, your confidence is a little bit, shaken. But then, you have to try again. There's another distance that you have to execute together. So get back in control, own up to it, say sorry, and then get back into control. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I hear that a lot from other younger coxes as well, because you do make a lot of mistakes, and a lot of coxswains are not
Yeah.
coached, so they have to sort of figure out all of these things on their own, which is a huge challenge. I mean, coxing is a very difficult job, and it's very easy for them to sort of have to make assumptions or kind of just repeat what they're told, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to process thinking for yourself, making mistakes, having the guys yell at you. There's a lot going on. And
Yes,
so
certainly. Yeah.
yeah, and so what do you think, if something does go wrong, you own up to it, your confidence is a little bit shaken. How do you sort of keep yourself in the game? You've made a mistake, you're a little bit stressed, maybe the guys are kind of getting unhappy, maybe it's a tough
Mm-hmm.
practice.
Yeah.
Like things just aren't really going well, or it's just one of those days, just things aren't working. um, how do you sort of maintain your cool and your calm when things are a little bit stressful?
I think just keep focusing on the next thing. Like, do if something went wrong and there's nothing you can do about it anymore, then you just have to go on. Don't take too much time thinking or stressing about that, and just try to go to the next thing, and try to not make that mistake again. I think that's very important. Yeah, but it
Mhm.
can be hard, but just it's a little bit just dedication. Just keep trying.
That's perfect. And then what if you have somebody in the boat that maybe talks back to you a lot? Dealing with difficult personalities. I know I certainly have had boats where guys have made things, even at very high levels, where guys have made things very difficult. Just everything you do,
Mm-hmm.
they're constantly questioning or talking back or saying, why are we doing it this way? Why this? Why that? And it's like, just be quiet. Like, just stop talking. But you can't always just be a dictator and just say shut up. You have to
No.
sort of there's a different way to manage those very difficult personalities, and it can be very distracting when you're just
Yes.
trying to do your
Yes.
job. So let's say that you have a guy in the boat that's constantly questioning you or making you even doubt yourself a little bit, doubt a call. How do you deal with that person?
I think it depends on the moment that it is happening during the training. So sometimes you're doing a long distance practice, and there's a lot of time that you can discuss with the person that is having trouble with what you're trying to do at that moment. So I think then you can decide and put it off a little bit, and then when you have a break, then you can talk about it with them. Or when it is your strokesman, then you can. Sometimes I just try to cover my mic and discuss it with him if he has a problem with something. But sometimes it's sometimes even during the race or during well, luckily I've never experienced that, but during a distance that you're doing in your practice, then there's no time to discuss. So it's just, then it is just the way that that I had in my mind, because I communicated that with all of the other guys. So it's just going to be, for that moment, it's the way I communicated it. And then if you have a problem with that, then we'll discuss it, after we finished.
Yeah, I know that's kind of what I do too. If I have a difficult guy, again, this doesn't happen all the time. A lot of times guys they're pretty good. Most of the time they're pretty good. They yell at you in the
Yeah.
moment and stuff, but I have had a couple of those guys that just, I mean, just constantly. And I will tend to take them aside maybe after practice and say, like, look,
Yeah,
is
for
there
instance.
like, help me help you?
Yeah.
What is there a way everyone seems to be okay with this except for you? Is there something that I can do to, lower your stress a little bit or call something differently? So I don't know if that's something that you would do too, is kind of pull someone aside afterwards.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you could do that. And also, sometimes there's a reason that they have a problem with something and you're not quite sure why, and they have another reason than you imagine it would be. So I think you can clear that problem if you take them aside after training. Yeah.
yeah, because sometimes it's not even you. Sometimes you find out they're mad
No,
at
most of
something
the time
else.
it's not even you. No.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I would love to dive into some of these listener questions because
Yeah.
some of them are so good, and I think this will cover a lot. So, we wrote to people asking for their most pressing questions. Now, these are people that um, are coxing men. So, the first one is, how do you balance being one of the boys versus a leader? So you want to be a teammate and you want to be, you want to be the cool teammate, but you also have to be a leader.
Um, I think for me it's kind of an on the water, on the land thing, I think personally. So I think on the water, it's definitely your role to lead at that moment. So that comes very naturally. And then on the land, well, it is important to also be in that leadership role before you start a training, or definitely when you're starting a race that day, and
Yeah.
you're on the land. But after that, during lunch or stuff like that, I think it's something you can put aside and just be part of your team.
Yeah, exactly. I think humanizes yourself a little bit too. Like you don't always want to be,
Yeah.
the dictator. You want to be approachable. You want to be there for them. Another thing, and tell me if you disagree, but I tell coxswains too a lot of times that you have to remember that this is your race too, or this is your piece. Like you are also on the team. A lot of coxswains sort of lose sight of having to do all of these things for the guys all the time. But you have to remember that this is your win or loss in a race as well. And it's so I think kind of taking ownership on the water of that and saying like, look, this is for me too. Like
Yeah.
I'm out here working, just as hard, maybe not physically, but lead on the water, but then afterwards enjoy what you did. Have
Yeah.
enjoy, go out and have a beer with the boys, or whatever it is. Just kind of be the teammate that also had a good race, or
Yeah.
hopefully didn't not have a good race. But I guess I guess we've all been there. So I think that's really important, that balance.
Yeah, me too.
So
And I think that leadership, like, of course, it's an important role for Coxswain to lead, but it's kind of um, a team effort as well. Like you're not it. yeah, it's not a dictatorship. Like you implement and you execute a plan that you agreed on together. So it's not that you only cox through your own vision or something like that. So I think that really helps, to lead, but also to be a teammate at the same time. Like discuss things and be sure that everyone, or mostly everyone agrees. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put that. That's so true. Well, and then all the responsibility isn't necessarily on you too. Like it makes it more of a team effort.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I
You're
think
human, so of course it's not only your vision, only your plan. It's impossible.
so
Yeah.
true. That is so true. Now, this one I thought was really a great question.
How do you build up a friendly relationship, but also be competitors, as coxswains on the same team?
Yes, yes, yeah. So what I would think is that you leave all the results on the water. Like do a very good job, do the best job that you can as a
Yeah.
Cox, but there's no reason to be unfriendly to anybody else on the team because the results will speak for themselves.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think you can learn a lot from rowers in that perspective, because rowers have to deal with that all the time. Like you're very good friends, but you're competitors as well. And you never know. Like maybe this year you're on a team, and then the next year you're not, and someone else is. And I think they deal with that very well. Like I well, I think some of the time I just miss a little bit of the tension between them, because it's something you maybe notice during, like, in the changing rooms or stuff like that. But I think at the Dutch team, they do a pretty good job at being, good friends, have a very friendly relationship, but also be competitors. So learn from your rowers in that, yeah, in
That's
that
so
respect.
true.
Yeah.
That's so true. That's a really good point. Um, okay. All right. So this girl writes in and says, sometimes I'm told that male rowers, quote, just prefer guy coxes. How do you respond to that?
um I
First
think,
of all, that's rude. But I've heard that before too. I actually have heard
yeah.
that before.
um I honestly have to say, I've never heard that before. And at school, Mm, I think besides one guy, we only have female coxswains. So it's a thing that I'm very used to. It's a thing that all the rowers at my club are very, very used to, that they're always coxed by a woman. And I think I can understand that, for certain teams, you do have to have a connection with your team. That's very, very important. So that is a distinction that um, that is important when you select a coxswain. But I don't think that, necessarily certain qualities are for a female coxswain or a male coxswain. I think, you have to see for every person, for every coxswain, how what are the qualities that someone brings. And in my opinion, that's not based on being a male or being a female.
Hmm. That's really a good way to put that. And then, actually, on that note, um, she continues on and says, "What part of being a woman do you think makes you a better Cox? Do you think we have
um
any advantages? I think we do."
Yeah, I think maybe in some aspects you do. I think what is very important, as a coxswain, is being able to communicate, and being able to understand other people, being able to empathize. And that's something generally women are good at. But so that is something that I would say is a quality, that can really help. But again, it's not, you're not every woman is able to empathize, and not every man is not able to empathize. So yeah.
Um, what are some qualities that you think helped get you chosen for this role? Like, what makes you specifically, what qualities um, got you chosen for this? Like, what made you stand out from being an okay coxswain to a great coxswain?
I think what my team was looking for, and what is something that is my strong suit, is just the feeling of the boat, and understanding the technique, just the rowing technique. So that is something that is for me very important, that if I call on something, that in their minds it's the right thing, and that sometimes when a coach is looking for something, that you say it before he does, something like that, intuitive, and being able to understand the flow of the boat. Yeah, I think that really helped, for me to get selected on this team.
Now, do you think rowing before helped you as well?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think like, it's hard to do the practices in the way that the guys can. It's near to impossible, but I do think that it can be very helpful to once in a while get back into the boat and row yourself. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true. That's so true. Um, yeah, I think we definitely need to keep learning too. I know when I was a newer coxswain on men's teams, I found it very difficult to sort of stay ahead of them. It always felt like they knew more than me, even if they really didn't. Even if they were novices, they were still the ones in the boat, and they knew more, or they knew what was coming, or it was like they just understood everything magically, and I didn't.
Hmm.
I was still having to learn. And um, so, what would you say would be a strategy for like a newer, younger master's coxswain to sort of stay ahead of the game? Like you do, like you said, you want to almost be a mind reader. You want to say something before the coach does. You have to anticipate. How do you become good at that?
Um, I think what I did most of the time was that, the first thing that's important for that is being quiet for a little bit, and focusing on just sensing what the boat does, sensing the sound of the catch and the finish. You can really get a lot of information from that. So that is the first thing that's really important to learn. And then, as you do that, as you're trying to sense, look for the things you would call on, or maybe improve. And sometimes you're not sure about it, and you're kind of guessing, but you're not really, especially at the beginning, in your first year, it's hard to just guess and just call on, the catch or the finish or whatever. But later on, if your strokesman, tells you something that you already thought about before, or your coach does, then you can kind of train yourself, like, okay, so that was correct. So I can really, build a little bit of a relationship, a trusting relationship with my own thoughts, that I can call on that something that I'm sensing. And that's the way you can train yourself, I think, in sensing and feeling the boat.
That's so good. And we also get a lot of questions about specific calls, and we could go into that forever because every boat is very different from
Mm-hmm.
another. Men, women, just boat to boat. All elite boats are all
Yeah,
different.
for sure.
So specific calls are very difficult. But one thing I do get asked about a lot is rush. So coxswains will say, I know my boat is rushing, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to fix it. I don't know where it's coming from. And so a lot of times they're telling their boat, we're rushing. Well, they
Yeah.
already know that. They
Yeah.
already know, but they don't know what to do to fix it. So just for that one problem, just because I get so many
Yeah.
questions on that, what do you look at when you know there's a little bit of rush, there's a little bit too much movement towards the stern?
Yeah.
How are you going to go about fixing a problem like that?
Okay, well, I think that depends on your rhythm. So, for instance, you have rhythms that take a lot of time in the finish. You have rhythms that, are very quick in the finish, but then, when you're moving along and putting your arms away, they take a little bit of time there. So it's important to know the rhythm your boat is rowing in, and then do something with that. So if they're rushing, then look for the moment of peace in your in your rhythm, in your stroke, and then really focus on that and be precise about that, that everyone is paying attention to that, a little bit of time in the preparation or in the finish. And I think that's a way of keeping your speed, but also emphasizing your rhythm, and then also not rushing.
Yeah, I think that's really good too, is kind of really knowing what you're looking for, really knowing what you're looking for. Because
Yeah,
of course, a lot of times, you're not necessarily thinking about that. You just feel the backward motion or feel that movement in the wrong
yeah,
direction. Um, but you don't stop to think like, oh, well, what is it supposed to be? So a lot of younger
that can
coxswains
be
are like,
hard.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And then sort of how to feel that. And I think as you spend more time in boats, you can start to feel things happening even in your feet, on the footboards, like where we sit. You can feel where the movement kind of starts to come from, whether they're not getting their bodies over first or,
yeah,
where that rush is coming from. And you can feel it in different parts of the boat, but I think that does take a little bit of time. So
yeah.
feel free to disagree with me anytime,
No,
whatever.
no, definitely. Yeah, and try coxing a lot of different boats and a lot of different rhythms, and that way you get a little bit of a feeling for that as well, I think.
Yeah, that's true. And sort of on that note, talking about rush and calls, we had another girl write in that asked, actually from Amsterdam, and
Mm.
she wrote in and said, I'm having trouble making calls at the right time. Now, this is kind of a big question, I guess, but
Yeah.
how would you recommend sort of making calls at more precise times? Like she thinks she's calling things at the wrong time. And I'm not sure exactly if she means time, like she can't quite call things on the
Mm-hmm.
catch or the release, or if
Okay.
she's thinking that her calls just aren't good at the right time. I'm not sure
I
what she's
think
thinking.
Well, I think the first thing is of course very important that you call on the catch and the finish, and you call like in the rhythm of the boat. So you speak along the rhythm of the boat. That is of course important, and it makes it a lot easier to take in for your rowers. And the other thing is a little more advanced, I think, like the timing that you're calling on something technical. So maybe something inexperienced coxswains are struggling with um, is that they wait too long for something to call on because they're unsure about it. So that's something you can just deal with, just to try. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. Okay, move on and just practice. Like your rowers didn't learn rowing in 10 days, so you're not going to cocks perfectly in 10 days. So it's something that takes time. But definitely check with your guys and with your coach, like, the timing of this call. I struggled a little bit with that. Was it, was it right? And it's different for long distance trainings. Like, you won't get in trouble with two or strokes too soon or too late. It's not a very big problem. But for distances, and especially for racing, it has to be that stroke, and not two strokes later.
Yeah.
So, but probably your rowers will feel exactly like, if they're experienced, they will know when you had the right timing or not. So they can really reflect on that as well.
Hmm. I agree. I agree 100%. And I think the takeaway there too, and you said this before, is to listen. I think if you are a newer coxswain, you feel like you constantly have to be talking, and you really don't. Silence is good, quiet is good.
Yeah.
I also, when I'm taking out a new boat, or even just sometimes if I just want to, I just want to be quiet for a while, I'll just tell them, guys, I'm going to be quiet for a little bit. I'm just going to feel what's going on. I'm just going to, take a little time, focus on steering, um, and just kind of think about what's going on. So just be quiet for a little bit. And a lot of times the guys, I think, really respect that. And I think that allows you to kind of gather your thoughts a little bit and take
Yeah.
the time. It buys you time, I think, to feel the boat and to take advantage of, looking at what the blades are doing and feel what the guys are doing and what's happening. And um, I think sometimes the silence too can show confidence.
Yeah.
So,
Sure. Yeah.
if you're just saying like, I'm just taking a minute here, especially in a long piece or practice, you can't always, obviously you have to call things sometimes, but just taking a little bit of quiet time, kind of feel the boat.
Yeah, and you show that you're really, you're really motivated to call on the right thing, and not be hasty about it.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about rigging, just really quickly. A lot of people also write in about this and say, like, I feel like I need to be there, helping rig the boat and know a lot of the mechanics of the boat, but it's rigging is a skill. It is an art. What is your involvement in the rigging process? Like, are you there before rigging up the boat for the guys? I know some coxswains do that, or do you have somebody do that for you? Like, what's your involvement in the whole rigging process?
I think most of the time we just do it together, and then I try to help out with little things, or sometimes when we need bigger adjustments, then the guys do their training, and I'm there with the coach, and I try to help a little bit with the adjustments. I cannot say that I'm like the rigging guru or something.
Oh, me neither.
Um,
Me
no,
neither.
I some things are just, I have to they have to explain it to me like twice or three times for me to really get it right. But no, I think it's one of the things that were very different between my sports club and the team I join now, because like very little adjustments can make a really big difference in the way you sense the boat, and the way they row, and also in your rhythm and in your stroke rate. So I think it can be a very interesting thing to look into as a coxswain, definitely. And I think it helps for just feeling like the teammate you are, to try and help, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a really good skill to know, and I will only speak for myself here, but I'm constantly trying to learn about rigging. Just when I think I've got some of it down, I'm like, oh, I just learned something new again. I just
A
there's
new
always something
tool
to know.
or something.
Exactly. Exactly. Somebody wants their foot stretcher somewhere else, a different height, different length. And I'm like, oh, yeah, now you've thrown the whole thing off. So, but I think it's really good practice. And sort of on that note, as we sort of near the end here, what do you think coxswains can do on the side when you're not rowing. Let's say the guys are erging or you have a day off. What are you doing in the background to become better, to improve either something you're personally trying to work on or just learn more about the sport?
I think you can do a lot in that aspect. I think one of the things I do a lot of the time is record myself during practices and then listen back. Something I also do is keeping track of the speed during certain important trainings and distances, but also during the race. Look back to races that we've done before, and just see what you're doing, looking back on that, and remembering the things you said during that race, and reflect. So after every race, as a team, we will reflect, but I will reflect on that race myself as well. Um, Something you can do as well is just pick one of your teammates and ask them, do you have any points I can improve on? That's something you can do. You can listen to Cox recordings online and get inspired from that. And also, I was very lucky to have a very experienced coxswain as a coach at school as well. So, he's not officially my coach anymore, but I still call him for some tips and tricks and just advice on to handle some things. And one thing that is very important is prepare complex trainings, prepare your races, prepare if you're going on to a new course or a new lake or anything, prepare.
That's so good. I love that. I love that. It's because there's always something that you can do, and I think, like you said, talking to the guys is really important. Now, this coach you were talking about, is this Peter?
Yeah.
He is, if anyone listening doesn't know, Peter Wearsome is probably regarded as one of the best coxes ever. I'm actually really hoping to get him on here. I really want to talk to him. He is amazing. The way that he talks about coxing and rowing and feeling the boat, and really the simplicity in, obviously he's never coached me, but just in sort of talking to him in passing and hearing him talk about coxing, it's so simple, but so like he simplifies everything for himself,
Yeah.
but it's just dead on. Like he just, I mean, he's amazing. He's really amazing.
It's
So
an art for him, definitely.
it
Yeah.
really is. And the way he talks about it, I think he told me one time that he was like he was walking around, like he goes on long walks and thinks
Mm-hmm.
of like if this scenario were to happen in the boat, what three
Yeah.
words would I use to
Yeah.
get my point across and make something happen? Three words. It's amazing. It's amazing. Like I mean, I could go on forever, but really lucky that you got to be coached by him.
Yeah.
So
Really
I would move
lucky.
to
Yeah.
Amsterdam to be coached by him. he's,
Yeah,
he's
he's
so
a
good.
very good coach. Yeah,
He's
yeah. It
so
can be
good.
intense. Like he can be on a boat behind me and then just um yell at me and closer, closer, closer to the wall.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind of good. I mean, I've had coaches like that too. And you kind of like sometimes in the moment you're kind of like, oh, stop, like please stop yelling
can
at
be
me.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a little intense, but at the same time, you get out of it and you're like, I nailed that. Like that was that was good. Like
They're
I
so
really,
helpful. They're
so
so helpful.
helpful. And you always learn the most from those, even the guys, I think, in the boat that kind of give you a hard time sometimes. If you get them on your side, if they're
Yeah,
hard on you sometimes, but then they're kind of like your best advocate as well, then I think that can be so powerful. If you have those
definitely. Yeah,
advocates on your
yeah,
team and in your boat, that can really support you as well.
yeah.
So,
Because
yeah,
most of the time, those are the experienced guys.
exactly.
So they're extremely useful. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess before we sort of wrap up here, I've taken up so much of your time, so I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you can tell other women coxswains that you think might help give them an edge, maybe over a competitor, or just sort of staying ahead of the game in the boat a little bit? Like, what are one or two things that you think women can do in a men's boat that might um, make them more highly regarded, make them okay to great?
I think I think what can really help and what guys most of the time they appreciate a lot is lower your voice a little bit. So sometimes female coxes can be, when they get excited and they get competitive, they can, use a really high voice or sound a little bit hysterical. And most of the times, guys really like a low, confident, steady voice. And I think maybe if you try and incorporate that sometimes in a race or during a piece, I think it can help because when you're a rower and you're kind of nervous or you want to get something done, what do you want to hear? You do not want to hear an hysterical voice. So I think that can help a lot.
That's so good. I didn't even think to throw that out there. That's a that's a really good piece of advice. Absolutely. Yeah, and just kind of talk to them. Just kind of talk to them. Yeah, I think that can kind of do a really good thing for the boat, the boat feel, just kind of calming everything down. Again, even like being quiet, like we kind of talked about before, just kind of lowering the stress level, lowering the tension level, and just kind of taking the time again to just think, like slow down a little bit and think. So I know there's a lot going on in the boat, but just relax, which is much easier said than done. So
Yes, it is. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else that you want to add? I would love to hear, like, what are you doing while we don't have any racing? What are you working on, or what do you do?
I'm a medical student as well, so I'm currently writing an article for a disease that is occurring in children. So that's something that I'm working on, spending a lot of time on, and I'm trying an art course as well, just to see how that's going.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So you're staying busy.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Definitely busy.
Exercising a little bit, yeah.
Perfect. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so, so much for doing this and for going through some of these questions that people wrote in. There were so many, I sort of had to consolidate some of them, but I think we hit on a lot of pretty good points. So, is there a place that people can either find or follow you on social media?
Yes, of course. My personal Instagram is Aranka Larissa. And our team Instagram is Holland 8. It's all a little bit in Dutch, but yeah,
If I
Dutch
can figure it
names.
out, I think anybody can. Like I was, yeah,
Hopefully.
exactly. I was telling Jasper before, it's like my Dutch is very rusty, so you'll have to forgive me. I was like, please translate this for me. Okay, well, thank you again so much for your time. I think it was so great to hear from someone like yourself who has such an amazing story, and you're so talented. You do so many different things, and you've definitely been there, at the highest level and gotten to do some amazing races. And I think maybe the first, unless the Canadians were gonna do it, really the first woman that was gonna go in the 8 to the Olympics.
Um, the Australians as well.
Oh, the Australians too. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think Canada too.
and
But
Canada as well. Yeah.
it's amazing to kind of see this change. So I'm obviously, rooting for you. I have a very special place in
Thanks.
my heart for the Dutch, so I don't tell anyone. Not that I'm biased. So thank you again so much.
No
Really
problem, no
appreciate it.
problem.
So
I enjoyed it.
good. I'm so glad. Well, again, if anyone here listening wants to get in touch with either of us, feel free to do so. All right. Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Candid Cox Cast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in coxing and rowing. And I get a lot of questions about women coxing men. And I knew